Welcome back to the PMC Project, the Positive Masculinity Project. I want to get started right in here. We've got some content that just can't wait. So we moved it actually up in the rotation here so we could get this. We've had some calls, some emails come in on this. And I think, Ragnar, this is one of the biggest ones we talk about when you talk about upgrading your life. And so I want to come to you first. But before I do that, I want to remind everybody, look down on the bottom of your screen, hit that red subscribe button, right? That really helps us out on this. All you YouTubers, if you're coming to us on some other podcasts or on SoundCloud, we're over on the iPhone system on the podcast app there. Go ahead and hit subscribe. That'll really help us out too. I want to get right into it today on this topic. It's called PVC topics. PVC, protein versus cotton candy. Okay, so again, the Positive Masculinity Crusade, the PMC Project, coming at you. We want to get it started here really quickly on PVC. This has been a big one for us on this, Ragnar, and take it easy, Abednego. We'll get to you in a second. All right, so just keep all your notes in there. This was a one that's real crucial because on Monday morning stuff, we keep getting the same stuff, Ragnar. People, they come in here with all these ideas and their boundaries are all out of control, okay? They're hanging out with people that oscillate on lower levels, and we'll get to that in a minute, what that means, oscillation levels, okay? But they're living on cotton candy, playing with their phones all day, playing with their apps all day. And I know I just got done telling you to subscribe to all our apps, but that's fine. We're going to set that aside just for a minute. But all these people who are just junkies on their phones, on computers all day, cotton candy stuff usually, video games, this kind of thing. Ragnar, the PVC concept is one we came up with, I figure, of a year and a half ago. Protein versus cotton candy. And there's two things that we want to do, two big things. We're going to talk about protein versus cotton candy in your own personal life individually, and then also how that brings chaos to your life if you're not applying those same PVC cotton candy type of stuff, if you're not applying that in your friendships and your top 5 and all that too. So Ragnar, I know you've got some good things there. Kick us off with PVC, with the protein versus cotton candy things, and how these type of principles have impacted your life and helped you to get into a more productive life.
I think that protein and the cotton candy analogies are good because cotton candy tastes good, but it's horrible for you, especially if you eat a lot of it. We all know muscle and your body's built with protein. And I think we just realized that the more protein relationships, and by protein, I mean intimate, deeper, well-rounded, balanced, trustworthy relationships you have in your life, real relationships you have in your life, the higher the quality of your life, the higher your satisfaction, the lower your depression. And it's the opposite with cotton candy relationships. Cotton candy are more superficial relationships, your Facebook friends, Instagram friends, people you bump into at the high school ball game on Friday, things like that. If the majority of your life is full of what I call the cotton candy friends, then I think your depression levels increase and your quality of life decreases. And so we all want to have some of that cotton candy, but I think it goes back to the same ratio we always end up in our topics is the 2/3, 1/3. I think it's the ideal ratio for that is 2/3 protein, 1/3 cotton candy relationships, because you want to have some of the frilly and the fluff and the superficial stuff, but you really have to have that base of protein to keep people healthy mentally. And I think a lot of guys go through a depression because, especially when they get married, they get isolated, kind of away from their friends, their mission. Next thing you know, they're really just a kind of a third kid in the house. Sometimes that's how they're treated, and they don't have a lot of friends to kind of talk to and stuff. And maybe they watch a little NASCAR, a little football or something like that. But they're kind of in this cotton candy realm, and I think a lot of the guys get depressed from that. And one of the things we talk to these guys first, just when they're struggling like that, is to get them into some kind of a protein environment, build up some lattice and some pillars in there to support that, and add some protein relationships to them. And we notice that those guys, once they do that, once they have that group or that bonding going on, they very quickly, their mental health becomes much better, much quicker, and they're not thinking those bad thoughts as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things, though, right, Abednego? When we come back to you on this, Ragnar just said, when you get into your relationships, when you start moving into protein relationships, okay? So, and we're going to go there in a minute, but if we just stay on this individual side, okay, about how to monitor ourselves, what are we looking for on this? So I think Yeah, you need to work individually on your own growth. Maybe that works for you guys to look at it on a pro growth side, which is a term we talk about a lot too. Okay. There's fluff, there's cotton candy, there's protein in the pro growth side. Okay. So and we're going to go there a little bit later here. But when we talk about who's in your top 5, really. Okay. And so before we get into that, because we're going to look at Abednego, we're going to go to both of you on this about what are some indicators, and we talk about this word oscillators. What are some indicators that you're way over heavy on cotton candy side, or you're way too much on the protein side? Because there can be, obviously. You could be too much way out of here, okay? It still works on this alpha beta scale, okay? Just like we want 2/3 alpha, 1/3 beta, okay? As a man, that's really, really a golden ratio we're trying to get. Abednego, on this, what does that mean to you? And I'm gonna preface this a little bit differently, okay? Because going through in your own life, you can share as much with that as you want about what you've been going through in the last year. But I imagine this in terms of sense of urgency, okay, and how long we have to live. I was thinking about that the other day. How long we have to live on this planet and these kind of things. There comes to be a different urgency with a lot of us somewhere that we don't have maybe when we're in kindergarten or in 7th grade or whatever. That'll kind of move you over to the protein side of things in life. You start having conversations you weren't having a few years ago. Abednego, overall though, PVC concepts, what are you getting out of this right now here? What's been helpful to you on that?
Well, I mean, what I'm going through right now is prostate cancer. And, back almost a year ago, I had my prostate removed. And then a few months after that, had radiation. And then a few months after that, found out that I have metastatic prostate cancer, which means it's everywhere. And once it leaves the pelvic area, then there's no cure for it. It's basically, you just want to turn it over to a chronic disease where you just treat it to keep it at bay. And so, that's where I'm at. And so, yeah, there is a huge sense of urgency to get messages out. My day-to-day job is a pulpit minister, and, to get the message of Jesus out. That I feel a very huge sense of urgency for that, but I have a sense of urgency for this kind of work too, to help men in their issues. I've spent 20, 25 years at least, maybe 30, looking for answers for dead bedroom situations and things like that, and couldn't find anything. But I was just looking in the Christian bookstore and, things like that. And everything just seemed to say the same things until I got hooked up with some pro growth guys who was looking outside that realm. And it's basically the 2 guys on the screen here. And when I got with them, and then they opened my eyes to some other things that I hadn't been aware of. And so that journey of getting with some pro growth guys who were more about the protein, it really helped me. I think sometimes in church, we kind of get a diet of cotton candy going, because it does taste good, and it's easy to get people to come through the doors if you're offering cotton candy. But it doesn't last very long. It's not satisfying. It doesn't take you to the next level. I also do some coaching with track and throwers, and we do a lot of weightlifting. And I know that if I'm going to be effective as a weightlifter, or we're going to build muscle, man, you got to have the protein side of things. You have to be putting protein in your body. And so, for me, it's this whole growth things. You got to have that. You've got to have that in your life. And so when we're talking, did you ask about indicators?
Yes, go ahead.
What are some indicators? Man, to me, I sit with a lot of people and talking about marriages. And the things that I keep coming back to that haunt me are these marriages that, they've been married 25, 30, 40 years and can't say the word sex to each other. They can't say that. And so you know, when they sit down, they're talking about local news, local sports, all the gossip. Hey, so and so did this, or did you know that this person cheated on that person, or they're getting a divorce, or this person's got an illness, and it's all talking about people, which what we say is like a low level oscillation. It's all about people. Very seldom is it about things, and almost never is it about ideas. And you know, it's real easy. Most conversations that people have are that surface level. Hey, well, it's great weather we're having today, isn't it? Oh yeah, you know, I'm going to do this and this. It's great, fine, but it's just surface level conversation. Very, very rarely does anybody get to the place where they feel free to share opinions or share ideas, and almost hardly never do we ever get to the point where we're just brutally honest, where we just tell the truth about everything. We're usually hiding something. And so, you know, to me, that's one of the huge indicators. Obviously, in friendships, it could be maybe whether or not you can share your faith, or whether or not you can talk politics and not hate each other and things like that. But man, for me, especially when we're talking in marriages, if they can't talk about sex with each other, I know that we've got a cotton candy relationship, and I've got my work cut out.
You know, Abednego, I'm glad you brought that up, because this, you had this in your sermon today. Okay. Actually, this is a concept that we talk about all the time. When people bring folks in front of the elders tribunal, we call it. Okay. Well, if you go back to Acts 14, they didn't like that Peter was involved with a miraculous healing on a crippled guy. And so they had to bring him in here to the elders tribunal and said, you cannot talk about Jesus anymore. We understand that you healed in his name, but you can't do this. So they were threatened and things like this. And the bottom line is about shame. People are trying to tell you what you can and cannot talk about. Okay. And they knew this was what was going on, but they didn't know how to approach that. Abednego, if you could go into that for a few more seconds on that, or a minute or two, or whatever you need, about that very statement there. Okay, listen back in Acts 4, midway through, talking about they could, and they admitted it, but they didn't know what to do with them. If you could just go into that a little bit. We want to, because I want to say that because we have the same problems today in our discussions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
The things, religious leaders in Acts 4, the situation that they're under is they're under Roman rule, and Rome could care less what they did, as long as there wasn't upheaval, as long as there wasn't riots in the streets and things like that, as long as there was peace with the people. Rome didn't care what you did. They didn't care who you worshiped. They could care less, as long as you paid your tax, whatever. And so for the religious leaders, they couldn't handle Jesus. They couldn't handle anything to do with Jesus, because they didn't believe in Jesus. And if they believed in Jesus, then everything was going to get flipped upside down. They weren't going to be the most powerful, wealthy people in Jerusalem anymore. And so when Peter and John heal this guy that's been lame for his entire life, and it's an undeniable miracle. He's 40 years old. He's never walked. He's never crawled. He's never even stood up before. And now here he is, standing, leaping, walking around, jumping, praising God. And they know that this has to be from God, but they can't figure it out. And so they don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe it's from Jesus, because then it changes everything for them, and it takes away all their power. And so they go in to squelch it, and they say, listen, you can't talk about him anymore. And so they lay the heavy hand down. It's the same way when maybe church leaderships use shame and things like that. It's all a control tactic to try to control, so that they can maintain power over the people. And to me, the best churches are the ones that release the power to the people and let the people, through the Holy Spirit, just take off. There has to be boundaries, and there has to be kind of guidelines for some of that, but you've got to let people go be who God created them to be and function in those areas. And if you don't, you're squelching the Spirit. And so that's really what these religious leaders are doing. they're squelching the work of the Holy Spirit, and they think they're operating from God, but they're not.
It makes it really weird because, Ragnar, one of the things that we see is, and so where I'm going to go with this is, and you can take it over here in a second, is that through shame, through control, through power moves, we want to limit what people's discussion is, and it kills relationships, it kills personal growth, all this. So there are things that everybody here has heard somewhere at a family reunion, Thanksgiving, or whatever. So maybe grandma or your mom or some aunt said, "Oh, we don't talk about those things." Okay. So, and we all know those, and there's some more probably, but I know there's 4 of them. One is money. You never talk about money. I know both of you've heard this, and I've heard it. That's off limits. Okay. We don't talk about sex either. That's certainly way out. Okay. So money, sex, politics, we don't do that because everybody's going to get in a fight at the Thanksgiving table. So that's out. Okay. So religion, we can't talk about that deal. Okay. So those are 4 biggest things that when we talk about protein, now society and families and your upbringing and school, everyone says you can't talk about this. So, but these are the things, okay, money, sex, politics, religion, these are the things that help you move in growth areas. If you can't even talk about this stuff, right? And so, Ragnar, we've been dragging people into elders tribunals forever, slapping people around, hitting them, banging them around the head. You can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. And that way we can control the people. What you've always said is way out there, okay? You've always said this idea about, man, if you stop shaming people, right, they'll tell you anything. And Ragnar, I want you to go into that because there's something really key here that everybody needs to hear. If you can share that with us.
Well, I think one of the things, to me, the Holy Spirit is a flow experience. And a lot of times what we try to do in a church situation or the elders tribunal situation with all the shame and judgment is we make it all left brain, accounting, straight line, number 2 pencil, and it's not inspirational. The Holy Spirit, when you feel the Holy Spirit, you should feel it cellularly. It should be a vibration in your body. You should feel an energy that you can't even describe in a paragraph. That's the Holy Spirit. It's a flow experience. And when you make everything elders tribunal and everybody's judging about what Susie wore to church today and it's every right dress and everybody's got to do this, it's a left brain experience and you've removed the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is a flow experience. And so everything around that, as far as the flock is concerned, is to be set up in such a way that it exacerbates the flow experience, doesn't hinder it. And so what I think happens in church, I mean, I've been to a lot of churches and it's almost 90% left brain. And it's like people are sitting in algebra class and there's no Holy Spirit. There's no Holy Spirit. You walk out there with the same vibration as you walked in most of the time. And that shouldn't be the case. You should walk in there like a Chevy Volt and be able to plug in your car and get some Holy Spirit because the environment is conducive to that flow experience. And so that's one of the things I think. And as far as judgment, most people, Brian Tracy years ago said in Maximum Achievement, he said, in the relationship chapter of that fantastic book, he said, you need to find one person in your life, at least one, where you can just empty yourself out with. You can just be completely unguarded and open and real with that person. And it will do a tremendous part for your mental health and your self-image, especially if they don't judge you. That's why therapists, pastors, things like that work well with people, because there's no emotional tie in there and the person can just open up and just pour everything out without judgment, with total unconditional acceptance from the person they're speaking to. And it's a very healing experience. And so a lot of people will tell you things you'd be surprised they tell you. If they feel that safety and that warmth, that presence, that experience of the now with you, and it's non-judgmental, and they can get stuff out, and it's freeing. It just cleanses the soul. It's like, Catholics do confession. That's a similar kind of thing, in a way. But so those are two different things there. But I think if you're talking about the Holy Spirit, it's a flow experience, and I to me, I've never read or heard it being taught that way. But to me, if you can label that as it needs to be a flow experience, then you can choreograph the church experience to enhance the flow experience, which enhances the Holy Spirit experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, when you look at that, if you go back there a second, it should be a place where we can recharge our batteries. It should be a place where we can plug in. It should be a place where you feel that power, undeniable, that just overcomes you. Okay. And without, going way over there, because I think that's going to be another one-off show that we can do, Abednego. We'll look at some of that stuff too as we go. One of the things you're talking about, Ragnar, is that people are afraid to share because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be shamed. That's the most terrifying feeling. Listen, I love that when you brought that up, Abednego, about oscillators. Okay. And I want to say that again. And if I didn't get it right, you guys can correct me, because this is part of finding your PVC people. Okay. Your protein versus cotton candy people. All right. Your protein people will be moving and oscillating at higher and higher levels. And you need to start circling around in those circles. And it's an upward spiral that just perpetuates. Okay. And so that's what I want to get into a little bit, because so say you show up and somehow you stumbled onto this audio today or this video. And so now somebody says, one of us crazy people jumps on here and says, you got to oscillate at higher levels. Okay. Abednego, you just went into that. I want to summarize it real quickly. Your lower level oscillators. This is, you're watching Entertainment Tonight, and all you want to do is see what's happening with Brad and Angelina and whoever these people are out there. And you want to find out, all about what their shoes are wearing, what kind of new masks they're having for COVID or whatever's going on. Okay. And all I do is talk about what's on People Magazine. That's it. What'd you say? Local news, local sports. This is all this is. They want to put on the old letter jacket and go out to the game and talk about who scored the touchdown. This deal. Okay.
Glory days. Bruce Springsteen.
That's the deal. Glory days. We could break out into song if we could, get this under control. But your low-level oscillators, all they talk about is local news, local sports. Your mid-level people, right? Your mid-level. They talk about some things. Your higher level, they're talking about ideas, about growth, about getting more out of life, this kind of thing. Okay. So when you brought that up, I'm glad you did, because we're trying to help when we get into this section now, as we start to close this out. Monday morning minutes. What can we do functional side? How can we help people to oscillate at higher levels? Okay. I'm going to start that off as we go around here a little bit. We don't have to get in a hurry to close, because I think we've just got some great content here going. One of the things that I know is the biggest way, and if you missed this video, you can go back and look at it on how do you increase your top 5. Okay. Again, on that, if you didn't hear that one yet, I just want to let you know that you become the average of the top 5 people you hang around the most. Okay. And the quickest way to increase your top 5 is to work on yourself, increase yourself, better yourself, get into pro growth yourself. So when we talk about PVC, protein versus cotton candy, these are things that you can start today, obviously on yourself. But then as you go forward, look at us 3 right here. We push each other. We challenge each other. What books are you reading? Okay. What kind of conversations are you having? Now, Abednego, you shared that real poignant story here about your own struggles that you're going through on the cancer side. You have a real, probably more focused idea about why you have to have 1/3 too. You need some cotton. You can't all day long talk about cancer. Okay. You got to have a balance here. But the temptation is hang around over here and let society, the church, whoever dictate what you can or cannot talk about. And if you take out all the protein topics, we're left with just nothing but cotton candy. Okay. So that's one of the things I say, what are some indicators? What are some indicators when you look at those topics that Ragnar, you brought up in Abednego in terms of the oscillation levels and things. What are some indicators as we go around looking at Monday morning functionality? People are tuning in here. How do we increase on this side and make sure we're moving toward protein? Okay. So I want to start off with that. Abednego, give us, one idea here, what people can do Monday morning stuff to make sure they're moving over toward a better balance on the protein side. What do you got for us Monday morning minutes?
I think for me, it's about realizing what your talk is. What are you talking about, and what are people talking about around you? Because I think sometimes we can kind of get lost in conversation, and we can kind of just kick it neutral, and we don't really realize that maybe we're hanging around a bunch of lower level oscillators, and we don't even realize it. And those people are out there. They're stuck in the 80s or whatever. And it can be easy to get into that group and just kind of hang out there. And so, to be aware of your conversations and the conversation that people are having with you. But I think also to be aware of that there's tension. If you're a growth person and you're trying to grow, but you're hanging around with a bunch of people who are low level oscillators, they're going to shame you for that. You'll be like, oh, what are you doing? Reading a book? Oh, that's just a waste of time. You don't need to read a book. They'll do whatever. They'll, not in a mean way, but there's always that tension, I think, between high level oscillators and low level oscillators. And you got to recognize that. I think mid-level guys can probably float back and forth fairly easily. A high level guys, it's hard to get down to a low level, and vice versa. For a low level oscillator, it's really hard to get up into that. And so, wherever you're at, it's just trying to get a step higher. If you're a low level guy and you realize that, just move up to a mid level guy, and get comfortable there and maybe step up. But I think, again, going back to the 5 that you hang around with the most, so important. And so look at who you want to be. Not necessarily who you are, but who you want to be, and try to hang around with some guys that are like that already, and they'll help you get there.
I do. And that's, I think that comes to the really hard part about it, right? Is how do you start to move into a different group, a top 5 group that's going to be more conducive to your growth here? How do you do that, Ragnar? Anything you got for us Monday morning minutes as we try to get some functionality in here?
Well, kind of tying into what I said earlier about the Holy Spirit, the flow experience. If you can get yourself quiet and ask your body after you leave a cotton candy interaction. Now, again, we talked about the 2/3, 1/3, and we all need that 1/3 of cotton candy. But when it starts to get beyond that 1/3, when you start leaving those interactions, you're leaving the party, you're leaving the local news, local sports stuff, you're eventually the high from that is going to go away quicker and quicker. And if you can get in tune with yourself and be honest with yourself, when you're leaving a cotton candy situation, you're actually going to have a lower self-image after a while. You're actually going to have a net loss in energy. You're going to spike while you're there for a few seconds, but as soon as you leave or get in your car or whatever, you're going to drop, because it's your intuition is telling you this is not healthy for you. But most people just turn the radio, start the phone, whatever, and they don't listen to those little voices, the quiet voice within that communicates that to you. But if you can get quiet when you're leaving those places, just monitor yourself intuitively. God's communicating with you there. The universe is communicating with you there, and this is a net negative for you. And if you just listen to those voices, there's a quote from Pascal. He came up with the gas laws in chemistry back in the early 1600s, a mathematician. And he said most of man's problems stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone, because they don't want to hear the voices. And that was in 1600, and I don't think Facebook was around back then. So it hasn't changed. And Thoreau in 1853 said most men live lives of quiet desperation. Same thing. So you need to listen to those voices, because your intuition, God, is letting you know, is this good for me or not? It's a feeling of comfort or discomfort when you leave those interactions. Do I have a feeling of comfort or discomfort? And if you're doing too much, if you're doing more than your 1/3 of cotton candy, you're going to have that quiet little intuition of discomfort. And that should be, you should take action on that and go into some of the things that Bendigo talked about earlier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, here's the thing. What I really like what you said on that, and so I'm going to put a label on it. And now, if you dig out some of our other audio, you'll hear this. What you're talking about, Ragnar, is that on a molecular level. Okay. Again, I'm trying to stay away from algebra, but everybody knows on a net positive or net negative. Everybody knows. Okay. If you're losing stomach lining or heart muscle, instantly your body's telling you this is not growth. It's fun to yuck it up and have some chips and have a Super Bowl party, but everything can't be a Super Bowl party. Okay. Everything can't be a slumber party. You got to take the pajamas off, put the Pop-Tarts away, turn the cartoons off, and get into the real world somewhere. Okay. Now, without that exchange, without that experience, you're going to be craving for that growth side. And that'll kill you as an individual as far as your growth. You'll be stunted. They've done all kinds of studies about what happens to infants in very short time period if they don't have social interaction. Okay. And what we're talking about here on the protein versus cotton candy, what we're talking about here is to go higher level and higher level. Okay. And so if it's a net negative or net positive, you internally know this on a molecular level. Start moving to higher level groups, higher oscillating groups. Okay. One of the things I must talk on mine is, and we'll go back and hit you in a second, both of you, because I know you've got some more things as we get ready to close it out. One of the things that really helps on what I've really started to go into, and we talked about this a little bit in a lesson we did a couple weeks ago on boundaries. Okay. You're going to stay low level oscillator. You're going to stay there because we know about this in the natural laws in nature about entropy. Things always go to disorder. And low-level oscillators are disorder. These are chaos people. There's always some chaos. These chaos junkies. They're in schools, they're in life, they're in community, they're at the Walmart, they're wherever, church. And if you don't have boundaries in place here, right? So you got to put some boundaries in place, and you got to put a hard boundary, and you got to stick with that. Okay. So that's on my first one, Monday morning boundaries. You got to stay with those boundaries, right? As we go around one more time around the horn on this before we close it out, Abednego, what do you got for us on Monday morning minutes on this?
I tell you, is for my Monday morning minute, I'd like to recommend a book, The Ultimate Secrets of Total Self-Confidence. I think that's a good place to start kind of putting some protein in your body and seeing yourself in a different way. And so, I think doing that kind of thing, or just reading a functional book, how about that? And having a conversation with somebody who's read that same book would be tremendous.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've always done in our group is that when we recommend a book, when we talk about a book, there's the accountability side too. Okay. Is that if you're not going to be in with us, if you're not going to read, if you're not going to be able to contribute, I'm fine. You're still a friend. I'm fine with all this. I'll see you at the picnic and all that deal. But really, it is hard. And I know it is for you, both of you. You can't just say you want to take up 2 hours of my day every time. You just can't be in my top 5 because that's what you wanted. You got to provide something. You got to provide some value here, right? And this book, what we're talking about, Ultimate Secrets of Total Self-Confidence, right? This has been one that's meant a lot to all of us. For me, I love what I got out of there from the awareness side, right in the middle of the book there, kind of. And that's just been a tremendous book. Ragnar, as we come to you, what do you got for us, buddy? Finishing up on Monday morning minutes on that.
I think most people, especially if they've been living lives of quiet desperation for a while, it's hard for them to sit down because a lot of them don't have the deserve level and they don't have the strong self-image, but to sit down with a piece of paper and pencil and just take away all possible restrictions and just try to write out what their ideal life would look like, or if that's too much, write out what their ideal day would look like as far as relationships, job, money, food, sex, whatever. And write that out. What does that look like? Is it all cotton candy? I doubt if it is. If you're really honest with yourself, I think you'll find it'll automatically go into kind of a 2/3, 1/3 thing. And then once you kind of have that figured out, and you won't be able to do, especially if that muscle in you is atrophied, you won't be able to do that right off the bat. It'll take you a week or so to finally get something on paper probably that you can stick behind. But once you have that on paper, now get a book, go on, listen to podcasts, go on YouTube, something like that, and find people that are doing and teaching what you want to add to your life. And then you'll start building that up pretty quickly. But you need to get clear on what an ideal day looks like to you, what an ideal week looks like to you, what an ideal bank account looks like to you, what an ideal wife looks like to you, relationship with children, what does ideal sex look like and feel like to you, what does an ideal body look like for you, what does an ideal meal look like for you, what does an ideal vacation look like for you. And once you get that clear for you, and that may be different from the guy across the street, but for you, and then start plugging into sources, Google, where you can find sources of people that teach how to do that or are already doing that. And then start moving in that direction. I think you'll find exponentially, you'll start moving up that ladder. It's worked for me for a long time.
You know, that's something that most people will never hear. Sit alone in a room and write down what's your ideal, well, listen, what's your ideal life? What's your bank account? What's your sex look like? What's your friends look? I mean, when was the last time you heard anyone tell anybody to sit down and do this thing? Okay, no, it's just, we're all in a pinball world. Just everybody's gotten kicked around and the ball's going this way and you're just doing this deal. Okay, my last one, and we're gonna go back to that real quick. We're talking about value, okay? And this, I love that when you talk about that, because it's like one of the things you've always said to us, and it resonates with our guys, and it always has, you know, Abednego, because every once in a while we'll get Ragnar down here to talk to our guys, okay? And one of the things that they resonated with so hard early on is this idea that, man, when your value is clear, right, decision making is easy. So it might frighten you right now to hear us talk about how do you move from different friendships over here. Maybe these people are chaos, move away. In regular small town or big town, doesn't matter. We see people all over big cities right now blowing up everywhere. One of the things we know is this is not a hard decision. If your value is clear, okay, Abednego, you've been thrown into a health situation. Now, if you want to take that to the extreme, if someone showed up on your door tomorrow and said, we did all we can do, you're going to leave 48 hours, that's it. You'd be pretty protective of this 48 hours. And who gets in? And all those phone calls that you don't answer anymore. Okay. There's a lot. So my thing is, again, on the accountability side. All right. You hold yourself accountable. Your word is law. And who comes into your life? No, they've got to support your value system. And if they can't do this, I'm sorry. It goes back to the pallbearers, right? They don't get to vote on you. If they're not carrying your casket out at the end of the funeral, they don't get to come in here and create chaos. And remember, there's only 6 of those people. Everybody else doesn't get to vote. It's the same deal. Protein, cotton candy. Really love everybody showing up today, doing that. Final thoughts, either of one. Let's start with you, Ragnar. Final thoughts before we get out of here. I'm good.
Cotton candy people don't get a vote in my life. Period. Only protein, only people that have qualified as protein people in my life get a vote. And they're Delta Force. I mean, they're an elite crew. They've been through a selection process.
Yeah.
They got the tab. And they only get a vote. Anybody else, I'll nod and smile, but it just doesn't get in. And I think it takes a while to get to that point, but that's where you need to get to. Look,
man, these are your Tijuana jail buddies. If you're stuck in Tijuana in a jail, your Delta Force, you need to know who, and you get one dime, and who's going to come and get you out of here. The commandos got to come in. Abednego, final thoughts.
A couple. As your value increases, your happiness is going to increase. We've talked a little bit about that. But one thing that I just came across, when you give value, you feel good. And when you receive value, you feel loved. And so, you know, this whole idea about values is huge in that.
Guys, it's been really good. We'll go into this in other times, but as we set this foundation, okay, then at least we know PVC, protein versus cotton candy. We have a foundation on this term, what we're going to talk about. So going forward, right, it's going to be really important to put this in there. And I can't believe somebody in here said the word sex, and I thought the whole internet was going to explode and blow up and all this stuff. Ragnar, it looks like we got some really good audio on your side. So I don't know what happened, but technically something changed on your side. I don't hear all the chirpiness. So I'm really excited about that, guys, on the PMC project. This one, okay? Protein versus cotton candy. The PVC topics is just a tremendous thing if you want to oscillate at higher levels, okay? So today on this October 11, 2020, guys, hit the subscribe button. Again, on the email side, if you want us to address certain topics or have questions, need someone to pull you out of the fire at 3 a.m., go ahead and get a hold of us, crusader1921@gmail.com. Guys, thanks and have a great week. We'll check in with you on another day. Thank you.